Hello, welcome to the series that looks at what we learnt in all of that week's Time Lord Victorious releases. All the little bits of information, all the little updates to the canon, all of how it all ties together. This week's video went from a mammoth video in the planning stages to a much smaller one, as several of the things that I pre-ordered did not turn up. Then to a sort of medium-sized one as I went, fine, I will purchase the digital copy of Doctor Who magazine as well as my subscription to the print edition while I wait for the print edition to turn up 4 days, now 5 in fact, after it being published. I'm not bitter. Okay, I'm a little bit bitter. So yes, we will be going over what we learnt in the final part of Monstrous Beauty, the Doctor Who magazine comic. We will also be looking at the new latest mini comic from the Comic Creator app, as well as the new Big Finish audio, The Enemy of My Enemy. Unfortunately, still no sign of the Eagle Moss Hero Collector figures with the accompanying booklet and short story. Don't know where that is. Was meant to come out on the 1st according to the timeline. I heard that might have been a misprint and it should have said red 10th, but it's now the 16th and it's still not here, so no idea where that is. We'll cover it when I get it, but we will do all the rest of the stuff. So welcome to the Time Lord Victorious canon update. So, in case you're new here, I'm Phil, and as I said, this is a series where I break down all the new information and how the different entries in the Time Lord Victorious tie together. All the new information doesn't mean a plot-by-plot breakdown. There will be stuff that doesn't get talked about, because I don't feel it's relevant to the event as a whole, let's say. I'm not going to do a beat-by-beat breakdown. If you want that, I mean, you're going to have to buy the stories, I'm afraid. But what I will give you is all of the information that I think ties the event together, all the new lore that we learnt about that is relevant to the event as a whole in these releases. But before we get to last week's releases, first of all, a bit of housekeeping. First of all, a little bit of news that we got from Big Finish, that unfortunately one of the releases, Echoes of Extinction, which was coming out on vinyl first, available through Asda, and then it was going to be available on download a week later, has been postponed because of the recent lockdown here in the UK related to coronavirus. So that means, unfortunately, we're not going to get it now till February. So it was originally coming out on the 27th of November, but now it's not coming out till February. And although initially I was hoping that we'd still get the download on the 27th of September, apparently it's part of the deal with Asda that the download comes out a week after it's released in the shops, so that means the download is pushed back too, unfortunately. So we're going to have to wait a little bit longer for that, which is a little bit frustrating, because it means a bit of the story that we were going to be getting in November, we're not getting now till February, which might affect, if you're following the 8th Doctor stuff especially, it might affect how the story plays out to you. It's a little bit annoying, but understandable given the current world situation. And the second bit of housekeeping is something that I forgot to mention, well, didn't realise to mention last time in the last edition. I wasn't going to say anything. You better not. In last week's edition, we covered the Brian the Ood t-shirt, and I mentioned the fact that it revealed that he was a member of the Order of Oberon. What I hadn't clocked was that the Order is not new to Who. They first appeared in the 6th Doctor story, Revelation of the Daleks, as the character of Orsini in that was a member. And they went on to have various references and featured in various novels and the other expanded media as well. So, sorry for not mentioning that last week. It completely slipped my mind. In fact, I hadn't made the connection in my head, despite having seen that particular episode of Classic Who. But now on with this week's entries, and a quick reminder that there will be spoilers. As I said, I won't be breaking down every single plot point, but there will be things, especially if they connect majorly to the event as a whole, that will be spoiled by this. So if you don't want to be spoiled, go away and read, watch, listen, whatever formats these things take, the things there first. First up, it was the final part of Doctor Who magazine's Monstrous Beauty. So Rose is a vampire. That was revealed at the end of the last issue. Now the Doctor's feeling pretty bad about it and trying to reason with her when the coffin ship is attacked by the Gallifreyans in bow ships. Now, bow ships, they are a type of Gallifreyan craft first mentioned in the TV episode State of Decay that were developed specifically to fight vampires. They've been referenced and seen in various expanded media since. Here, we're told they're a brand new ship at this point in Gallifrey's history, apparently developed by the Monstrous Hive. Now, I couldn't find any reference to the Monstrous Hive when I did a quick Google as existing in Doctor Who lore already. But if I'm wrong there, and if I've just missed something, please do let me in the comments below. Do the Monstrous Hive already exist somewhere else in Doctor Who lore that I wasn't able to find? Granted, I only did like a very, very quick search, so I'm happy to be corrected here. Interestingly, the Rassilon in this story seems unfamiliar with them, contradicting some previous stories that have claimed that, at least the legend is, that Rassilon developed them. However, the 8th Doctor novel Interference suggests the Rassilon may have stolen the idea, so perhaps, therefore, the Rassilon here will simply take credit for the design at a later date, despite not having actually been involved. The bow ships are equipped with thoracite arrows, which can pierce and kill most vampires. We find out that the Gallifreyans of this era are referring to themselves as the Space Lords of Gallifrey. So even without time travel, they still maintain that signature modesty they are so famed for. We get to see another class of vampire in this issue, the Primordial class, which has more similarities with a bat-type creature than a humanoid. The Doctor makes a deal with the vampire commander Drogon, who the Doctor had already realised was unsatisfied with how the higher-up vampires were treating their underlings. He helps the Doctor escape, and the Doctor provides a formula developed from Rosa's human blood, unique to the Dark Times, that will free the under-vampires from the reliance on the higher classes of vampire. It will also cure Rose of the vampire disease, but that will take some time, which is important. So after escaping the coffin ship, the Doctor takes Rose to recover on a jungle remote moon, and she's seemingly unconscious there for quite some time, as in one panel of her falling asleep, possibly into a coma, the Doctor is seen in his fairly pristine jacket, and in the next, when she wakes up, this jacket is torn and battered. I think it's fairly safe to assume that the rest of the 9th Doctor's involvement in Time Lord Victorious takes place in this time gap between those two panels, while Rose is unconscious, explaining why she isn't there for his appearance in the forthcoming book, for instance. And the final panel is the two heading back to the TARDIS, and presumably away from the Dark Times. This is the ending of the 9th Doctor's involvement, narratively speaking at least, in the Time Lord Victorious event. But not in the releases, because set before this last few panels of the comic, we get to the interim, and one of those things that takes place in the interim is the Comics Creator app, Episode 4. This mini-comic finds the 9th Doctor and a vampire woman named Madame Ikala, minor vampire royalty, in an icy landscape. Now, I read this before I read the final part of Monstrous Beauty, and I kind of hoped that the final issue of Monstrous Beauty might explain where this Madame Ikala character came from. It didn't, and I presume therefore we'll probably meet her in the forthcoming novel All Flesh is Grass, out next month, which will be the last appearance of the 9th Doctor in the event, in terms of releases, at least I think so. As mentioned in last week's Canon update, event producer James Goss revealed on Twitter that all of these mini-comics take place in an interlude in the action of that novel. Now, a more recent update, only that came out I think today as I'm recording this, from from Doctor Who Twitter, gave a new timeline of the events, and in it breaks down their forthcoming novel into part 1 and part 2. So that must be the narrative break that he's talking to. Presumably at some point in the book, probably about halfway, we get a narrative break and the action jumps forward in time a little bit, during which that break, various different adventures happen. You can see from it, for instance, that as well as all these Tales from the Dark Times mini-comics, we also get the Minds of Magnox audio, and the Mission to the Known short story, which I should have had already because it should have come with the Dalek figures that I should have got last week, but haven't turned up yet. Again, not bitter. In this comic, the two are being hunted by a shadow-type creature that turns out to dislike heat. Even the Doctor's blood is too hot for it, which is why it's attacking the cold, dead vampire. In the end, they keep the creature at bay with some fire, and await to be picked up by a vampire ship, perhaps returning them to the events we'll see in the forthcoming book. Also, last week we got the release of the first episode of the Dalek animated series. The first episode being titled The Archive of Islos. These are being released on a weekly basis on YouTube, so we should have at least one of these every week for the next several weeks. This first episode sees the Daleks attack en masse the Archive of Islos. The Dalek Emperor, Dalek Executioner and Dalek Strategist, who we've met before, are all on this ship. The Archive is guarded by robot Archivians. I can never pronounce this word. Archivans? I think it's Archivans. There is also organic life on the planet. They have gone into bunkers to avoid the attack from the Daleks. After a bombardment, the Archivans surrender. When the Daleks arrive at the Archive, they discover that the Archivans have sent the Archive through a portal and made a deal with a species there to save the organic creators and the Archive in exchange for giving them access to their time and the Daleks. We don't get a reveal in this episode of who that deal was made with, but we do know from other materials released already, specifically the booklet that came with the first Hero Collector models, that it is probably the Hond, who then are the main protagonists in the Titan comic Defender of the Daleks. So, from the Daleks' perspective, this series takes place between The Last Message short story that came in that booklet, and in which the Dalek Emperor first mentions the prospect of heading to the Archives of Islos, and then the Titan comic tie-in to Time Lord Victorious, Defender of the Daleks. Then we have the Big Finish audio, The Enemy of My Enemy. This picks up immediately after the end of the previous 8th Doctor Time Lord Victorious audio, He kills me not. Literally picking up from the same cliffhanger scene that left off from that of the Doctor and his TARDIS being kidnapped from the Vortex by the Daleks. Present on the Dalek ship is the Dalek Executioner, the Dalek Strategist, and the Dalek Commander and Dalek Scientist. The Executioner, in typical Executioner style, is keen to immediately exterminate the Doctor. But the strategist stops him, intending to get information and help from the Doctor. The Daleks reference that they have been sent to investigate temporal anomalies. We already know from the short story The Last Message that they were aware of these. In this story, they are investigating the planet Rax, which has had its timeline changed. The Raxians are a race that shouldn't exist. They turn out to be conquerors who have destroyed other civilizations but preserve their knowledge and artifacts. The Daleks pretend to come in peace and try to make an alliance with the Raxians in order to investigate. They propose teaming up to conquer the universe. Now, just in case it's relevant to a later 8th Doctor story, in the Time Lord Victorious event, the Doctor's given a communication device that, through the Dalek pathweb, directly communicates with the Dalek Strategist. During this story, the Doctor finds a stone tablet in the Raxian archive that has runes on it. These could be Keturah runes. Now let's talk about the Eye of Rax. This is at the top of a giant pyramid. It's a large directional funnel that focuses energy through the receptacle in the stone column. Listening to this, I think it's pretty heavily hinted that the receptacle that it's referring to is probably one of the Mordella crystals. The Mordella crystals, of course, being the crystals that the Keturah use to focus their energy and emit their gift upon the universe. One of the Raxians refers to the Eye of Rax as a de-evolver, which means this is the weapon that the Master miniaturizes and steals in the Big Finish short trip Master Thief. We're told in that he arrives on the planet just after the species have been wiped out, and they do indeed get wiped out at the end of this story. There are familiar markings to the Doctor on the weapon, possibly, again, Keturah writing. Another bit about the design is that the roof of the pyramid opens up to reveal an amplifier dish. And we're told that the Raxians developed this weapon from ancient Keturah technology. So it's not a Keturah weapon in itself, it was developed from technology of the Keturah that the Raxians found. Now, interestingly, the Doctor seems to have conflicting memories about whether or not the Keturah are still around or if they'd all died out. Because of course, time is in flux. There are temporal anomalies, and the Doctor has been noticing things that shouldn't be, and here we have an instance where his future self is affecting those events. The original timeline, presumably the Keturah are still around, albeit not very well known. They keep to themselves at this point in galactic history. But the 10th Doctor, as we have seen, has in the previously released novel The Night That Fallen the Dead, has gone back in time and effectively wiped them out. So the 8th Doctor has both versions of history in his head conflicting with each other. The de-evolver uses a organic matrix, which is the biodata of any specific species, in order to target all creatures of that species, which means that every race of that certain species throughout the whole galaxy can be affected at once. During the story, the Raxians take biodata from the Doctor, intending to use the weapon on his race, but the Dalek strategist saves him before they can activate the weapon. The Dalek's plan is, of course, to steal the de-evolver. Talking of the Dalek strategist, instantly in this story he's referenced as having repulsor technology. He can fly independently of external flying apparatus. But I'm pretty sure in the Defender of the Daleks comic it was hinted that because his casing is so old that he can't do that, and in fact at one point the Doctor has to save him from falling into a large pit. I don't know, maybe he had an upgrade between stories, or maybe it's just a continuity error. In the end, the Doctor negotiates a deal where the Raxians agree to dismantle the weapon and the Daleks agree to leave them alone. But of course, the Daleks betray this deal, and after the Doctor has left with the majority of the Dalek executioner returns and does what an executioner does best. He uses the de-evolver to wipe out the Raxians. And then he leaves the weapon there, presumably because they've got a more important mission to get on with in the Dark Times, but it just leaves it there. Maybe they're intending on coming back for it later. I mean, they don't, because the Master gets there first and steals it, but maybe that was their intent. The Doctor has worked out from the runes that the origin of the temporal anomalies is the Dark Times, and he tells this to the Daleks. But didn't they already know that? Because I'm pretty sure after they encountered the Hond, they knew the Hond came from the Dark Times, and therefore they had worked out that the Dark Times were where they needed to go. Perhaps this is a ploy to get the Doctor on board, make him think it's his idea to go to the Dark Times, and he's more likely to help you. If you suggest, as the Daleks suggest to him, that they should go to the Dark Times, he'd be maybe more apprehensive about it. So maybe it's a cunning ploy by them. Make the Doctor think it's his idea. So the Doctor links his TARDIS to the Dalek time ship engines and enables them to travel to the Dark Times. And that's it for this week. Next week, hopefully, fingers crossed, I will have received the Dalek Commander and Dalek Scientist Eaglemoss set, and we'll be able to cover all the short story and all the information we get in that booklet. There will also be, of course, another episode of the Dalek animated series to cover, and there is already out a new short story available for free on the Doctor Who website that I only saw after scripting this video, and I thought that's too late to include it here. I'm gonna just put it in next week's. So we'll talk about that next week, but if you want to read it in the meantime, I'll leave the link in the description below. Thank you for watching. If this has been at all helpful in helping you understand the Time Lord Victorious, how it all fits together and all that, I would very much appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, subscribe, share this video around to all your social mutuals and all that jazz. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week for another Canon update.